Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast.
Another episode of the Maker and the Drinker podcast. Hello, Jared Walsh here. I am the drinker. John Retzis, I think, is still consuming a couple of glasses of red from our last chat because it was amazing. If you didn't listen to our interview with Tim Smith, I highly recommend you do so. It was the first day of vintage in his brand new winery, and it was incredible. I took the podcast kit alongside JR up to the Barossa Valley, and we're going to do that for the next couple of episodes as well. Thank you so much to First Drop Wines, home of the brave in Nurayutpa, and of course Ozcast Network for allowing us to do this, connecting with so many winemakers and wine consumers around South Australia. And this is growing like a beautiful vine in the Barossa Valley or McLaren Vale or even Kangaroo Island. I spent some time on Kangaroo Island experiencing their wine too. Okay, enough from me. Let me tell you about our next chat on the Barossa Valley. Basically, Hollywood Boulevard is where you'll find Torbreck Wines, and their head winemaker there, Ian Hongell, has an amazing story. And even better, we were sitting in this room full of barrels. The smell of oak was one of the best smells I've ever experienced in my life. And this wine is spectacular. We do have a bottle to give away, the Woodcutters. If you are interested in finding out more or winning one, just share this podcast. You can like us on social media, like the Ozcast Network, and rate and review it. And please make sure you continue to support podcasts in South Australia. I just stumbled my words then because I'm pretty sure that I've had a glass of wine, but it's totally fine. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's chat to Ian Hongell, maker and the drinker at Torbreck Wines.
Ian Hongell. Ian, welcome.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for coming to Torbreck and welcome.
Can we cheers first of all? Because we're actually drinking wine in here, which is amazing. Cheers, cheers, cheers.
It's a dry interview, but like great radio sessions, if you remember Derek and Clive, in a couple of hours, if we had a couple of hours, it would be funny as hell.
Ian, this isn't just like wine that we're drinking. You got this out of a barrel, didn't you?
Yeah, this came out of a large format barrel called a foudre. So it makes the wine mature and evolve, but it doesn't make it too woody. So it's a little GSM blend, little Grenache Shiraz Mataro. Vibrant, beautiful,
it's not making
crunchy.
the wine woody, but it's making Jared woody.
I've got a woody, which is it's quite fitting because there's so much wood in here.
So what is this? Is a Grenache blend or?
Yeah, this is a Grenache blend. So one of the components that we'll have maturing at the moment for one of our blends in the future.
See, you guys take this stuff for granted. Just, I will just get it out of the barrel. This for me is like I'm in heaven right now. This is money can't buy stuff. So there's so much to talk to you about because we just had a little bit of a tour around the winery, and it's spectacular to say the least. It's probably one of the biggest that I've ever got the opportunity to walk around, and it's amazing. We will get to your basically journey to finish up sitting in this room, but tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into wine. What we're finding with this podcast is there's so many different stories, and we love finding out the people behind the wine.
So our family moved to the Barossa when I was about 4, and my father was involved in wine. He was involved in Saltram Wines, which is up in Angaston there. And so as a kid growing up, I was just around vineyards and grapes and tractors and trucks and forklifts and all those sort of things, and it seemed really interesting. I did a few vintages in high school and in the year 10, 11 and 12, and then thought, yep, this is for me. Did a gap year, did 3 vintages that year, did the Hunter, did the Barossa and did California.
Wow.
And then came back and did my winemaking. At that time I was also working just in anywhere I could just pick up my hand in the trade, and then got my degree and spent the next 35 years ending up here.
Wow. It's a pretty surreal story.
At, good old Roseworthy in there.
Yeah. So we were. It was quite cool. We were actually the last course that could actually be called Roseworthy that went through, and it was a little bit kind of a little pinch me moment the other day when I received an invitation in the mail to a 30 plus year reunion for winemaking students. So I thought, yeah, this is starting to
Starting to add up now. Oh, wow.
I was like that. I got the invite to my 20-year high school reunion. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. It's, that made me feel very old to start off with.
Yeah, I wasn't ready to go back to my 20. That was still too soon.
Yeah, fair enough. John, what can you tell us about how you got to know Ian and your relationship, how that's kind of got you two to be mates? Because I love finding out about, you're mates with everyone. We haven't interviewed someone you dislike yet, which is good.
Well, it's we try to get on well with everyone. It's a small world and it's a small industry. I got to the Barossa in 2001, worked at St Hallett with the great Bob McLean and Stuart Blackwell, just as Lion Nathan were buying St Hallett, and I think a few years later met Ian. He was working at Peter Lehmann, which is another iconic Barossa producer, and of course the great Peter Lehmann was alive in those days, and probably having a fair bit to do with the influence of wines and what have you, and Doug was in the business, so I met Ian in those days, and I remember we had a function at St Hallett years ago. I don't know if you remember, Ian, but you're a very, very good Guns N' Roses karaoke singer.
There's nothing coming out today.
But we've sort of have a mutual respect for each other's abilities and professionalism, and when we started this podcast, I'd earmarked some producers and some people to talk to, not just their brands, but also their ability to represent the Barossa and represent everything good about the wine industry. And Ian was, way up on the top of the list.
So yeah. You've gone through, obviously, Peter Lehmann, and then you end up here. So basically you've gone one to the other. Yep. Can you talk to us about the differences between the two? Like, what I've loved doing this podcast with John is learning about different wineries, whether it's a smaller winery or something as big as this, and how far-reaching it is. What were some of the things that you noticed?
So I spent 18 years at Lehmann's, and I moved back to the Barossa in 98, and worked there under the tutelage of a guy called Andrew Wigan, who in our industry is known as Wiggs, and he was very much my mentor, and I think gave me a really disciplined schooling in making wine. He was a very hard taskmaster, but also someone that everyone respected, and we always had a saying, you get the wines right and everything else will take care of itself. So that was a real apprenticeship of duration. 18 years later, I left Lehmann, and I left because there'd been ownership change, but also I'd been presented with an extraordinary opportunity to try something different. I wasn't going to just change for anyone, and Torbreck had approached me, and for the first few times I was sort of like, no, I'm pretty settled where I am, and I was happy to go, but it just felt like, you know what, if I don't do this now, I'll probably never get offered this opportunity again, and it was a chance to try to do something different. And Torbreck was different. Coming from Peter Lehmann's, you had much more focus on red wine, and it's all about the vineyards, and it's, we spend all of our effort getting our vineyards right and being very, very close to those sites, and then when it comes to our winemaking, it's quite simple. There's sort of no tricks or anything fancy. It's just really basic winemaking, but with some of the most extraordinary fruit. And I think what really did it for me was just tasting the wines and sort of feeling like there was a next level of pedigree, and that you felt that you wanted to be part of something and give it a go, and try to just make those wines that help really make Torbreck famous, and I think in many cases help really identify the Barossa as an international wine region. So it's to be part of something like that. Torbreck's very entrenched in the history of the region. We have extraordinarily high percentage of very, very old vineyards that we make wine from. And that really becomes the backbone to our story, and the backbone to what we do, and the kind of wines that we can create from those very old clones of Shiraz, Grenache and Mataro.
It's amazing driving in, and John, you were saying before, Mother's Milk, because the grapes are around this area.
Yeah, a lot of our Mother's Milk Shiraz is sourced just up the road a little bit, wherever it may be, in whatever direction, just out at Seppelsfield. That's sort of the bread basket, if you like, for first drop.
Yeah.
And not unlike Torbreck, we like to make wines speak of place and speak of, the Barossa, and these guys do it better than anyone. They have some, a suite of single vineyard wines that are, acclaimed around the world, and some iconic wines like Runrig and the Laird, which are, some of the best wines you'll ever taste in your life.
We're going to talk about them in a second. I wanted to ask, when you've got owners that aren't here in South Australia, do you find that trust is essential? Because obviously they're trusting you to know the area, to know the consumers for the Adelaide and Australian-based ones. But say with First Drop, for example, John, you're here the whole time and you own the business. But for you, Ian, there needs to be trust. Otherwise, this is not going to work.
The owner of Torbreck, he's an American guy. He and his wife own the business, and they're quite amazing. They're involved in a lot of. They have 4 wineries around the world, so they're quite close to them, but they're not actually involved in them. So, if you like, they've handpicked people to work in their estates who they see as professionals and passionate people in what they do, and I guess they create a framework for people to be able to achieve their best, and that's something that's you can't understand how important that is when you're not being handicapped to not be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So we are simply here trying to make the greatest possible wines we can.
Yeah.
And there's an uninhibited opportunity to try to do that, and that's what Torbreck's all about.
Yeah, and it seems like that as well. And I love that. Like, I think it's a contrast between so many different wineries around South Australia, just the passion that goes in, but also, as you said, you've almost got a blank canvas to go, I can put my own mark on this, but if you've been given the opportunity and the tools to be the best that you can, and that's proof in the wines that you guys make. How far reaching is the wine? Whereabouts all around the world does it go?
We sell wine now in 46 countries.
Whoa.
And it's not about selling great volumes of wine. It's about actually being represented by some of the best importers of the world, and being then presented in the best restaurants and best independent retail outlets and things like that, so people know that you're rubbing shoulders with some of the great wines of the world. You can find us in Finland, you can find us in Russia, Paris, London, all over the US, Hawaii, Denmark, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan. I can keep going.
Yeah, I want you to name all of them, please.
It's a test.
Geography test.
Yeah. Ireland, Scotland.
What's the capital of Uganda?
Yeah.
They sell wine there. They do, and that's unreal. I need to ask, because we've only been doing the podcast for about 6 months, but COVID's been around since then. What's the effects that it's had?
Well, domestically, it's people clearly haven't been able to attend the restaurants of their favourite Friday night hangouts, which is obviously really sad to see great people struggle. That's really hard. I think the flip side to that from a wine sales point of view is people have simply gone to either direct to customer on our mailing list, or able to buy it at retail outlets, and they're, instead of drinking out on a Friday night, they're drinking at home. It's been interesting because I think you realise how much Australians travel. When they stop travelling, how much spare money they've got, and what they then can spend on food and good wine, which is actually pretty cool. And I think local holidays as well is a real thing where people are taking that off. So clearly 2020 has been a difficult year for everyone, but we've come out okay.
I think their winemakers, and I'm learning this along the journey, have a subtle flex when it comes to their premium wines. So here in South Australia, if you're not familiar or you don't take the time to understand all the winemakers and wineries, you go, oh, I need a good wine, I'm going to go have a look at a Penfolds or something like that. But every winemaker has their own, which they're proud of, which has a price point, which is something which, what if you want to get a gift for someone or someone like that? John talking about the cream and fat of the land and Vodum and all these ones like this, then having a look at your website before we came, something like Laird, they are top notch. Can you tell us about your different price points? Because we know that you've got an entry level one, but then you can just keep going up. I'm having a look at the biggest bottle in the world that I saw over there earlier. Talk to us about them.
So the range of wines we make, if I talk specifically with reds, our entry point is really for Grenache-based blends with Cuvée juveniles, and then the woodcutter Shiraz. So both of those are just say $25, and then we go all the way through up to the new release of Laird, which will come out on May 1, which will be $800 a bottle.
What year is that?
That'll be 2016.
2016. So that was a really good vintage then in 2016 for that because of the price point there. Like, does that vary with the vintages?
It's only going up.
Really? Yeah.
So that wine is it's our most unique expression of a single vineyard Shiraz that we do. This site is quite extraordinary in the type of flavours and the power and the density and concentration it has. And, you might ask, well, do you drink it all the time? I hardly have it. And the truth is it's actually never... I haven't had a bottle that is, I think, in the zone where I truly want to sit down and drink it. And, growing up and tasting great wine and being around my industry leaders and mentors, you got to see wines from the 40s, 50s and 60s and things that are a lot harder to find nowadays. But you quite often ponder, what were they thinking when they wanted to make a wine that would live 50 years, for example? And I think Laird is a wine that, carries that kind of position where it could actually, I think, with a good cork and good cellaring conditions, go that length. So the first vintage of that wine's 2005, and incredible wine, just mind-blowing. But I still don't find it ready, and I want to actually drink that in another 10 years. So all the Lairds we're making now are for me for very much into the future, and they're a celebration of what Barossa Shiraz can do and the pedigree of the vineyards that we work with, and that, they allow us to showcase to the world just what this place is all about.
Are you guys your own harshest critics, though? Like, you're the same, John, that you need to be your own critical on yourself?
It's great to, taste these wines with the general public and the trade and wine reviewers. But, when you're tasting them, say today, and you're tasting a 2015, what have you, Laird or Fat of the Land or what have you, it's just not ready. But the harsh commercial reality of what we do is we need to taste these wines today and sell them. But hopefully, whoever buys them will have the patience and the ability to sell them, because they do look great after 25 or 30 years. I mean, one of the great Barossa Shiraz age that I've ever tried is that 71 Saltrams that PL made. I think, wow, that's a 50-year-old bottle of wine, and it's just amazing. So there's I think there's some, I wouldn't say it's a fallacy, but there's maybe a cultural thing that the Barossa or Australia doesn't make wines that can age. That's totally untrue.
Do you think that's a generational thing, though? Because I'm noticing that with media, with sport, with how we consume information, you look at streaming services with Netflix and Stan, we want things now. We're not prepared to wait a week for another episode to come out of your favourite TV show. So why I connect with First Drop so well, like every one of the wines there is ready to go. Like, yeah, it's good to put them away, but if someone said to me, here is an incredible bottle of wine, I'll have it with you in 25 years, probably I'm at the start of that generation of going, no, I want it now. And has that changed as years have gone on?
I think it's more about who you're speaking to in the wines that you're making, and there's absolutely a need for and a demand and a real interest in wines that are more crunchy and bright and fresh and young, absolutely. But there's to shun away or turn your back on, if you like, the classic styles and what that they actually can generate in longevity, there's a whole world out there of people that actually seek those wines, want to know about those wines and have them. And to me, that ready now, drink now style is an epic, gateway drug to get people into wine on their journey. They're not so confronting, they're bright, they're soft. That's really cool, and that people are doing that. And the kids are off the fizzy cans and things like that, and they're actually starting on a journey of wine, which to me comes also hand in hand with food. friendship, culture, all those things that go along with it. As you know, your dinner parties become more interesting, more engaging, or your social gatherings. There's something better to talk about and to be part of. There's an absolute place for that, and I love that. And for us with juveniles, that's that softer, brighter style of Grenache blend that we produce that isn't so heavy, that doesn't need to live for 20 years before you want to drink it. You can hit it, wham, flavour, thank you, delicious.
Yeah. John, can you tell us, we like to get your perspective on our guests today, because they're not going to pump themselves up too much. So Ian's great to listen to, but he's not going to say how good he is, so I want you to do that.
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, met Ian late 2001 and struck me as somebody that understood the region and was proud of his region, and a champion for the region. Obviously a very accomplished winemaker. You've been winemaker of the year in the Barossa, part of the Barossa vintage. You've been no? I haven't been winemaker of the year.
No, I haven't.
Well, we will make sure that happens.
Sure,
all right.
We'll speak to some people.
Yeah, we know people.
Make sure that happens. That to the side. Great at his craft. Very honest. Very earnest at talking to his colleagues and peers, and just a straight shooter. And Torbreck are very lucky to have him, because there's not many other winemakers that understand this place in terms of the region, champion this place, but also a great ambassador for Torbreck. And he and his family are great people.
How do we find out more? So people can come to the cellar door if they want to do a tasting, and then if they want to go and purchase some, whether it is like the person that wants an entry-level one, just goes, I want to try this for the first time, or someone who really understands their wine. Tell us more about ways we can get in touch.
So if you're visiting the Barossa, I think there's no greater experience than visiting a cellar door and actually hearing either from the winemakers, or most of our cellar store staff have actually worked in our cellar, so they actually have a real understanding of what goes on here, so they can speak with a sense of authority on what's happening. And you just get that connection, and you can feel it, you can taste it. That's, when I travel, I love going to wine regions, even though it's what this is my job, but actually I love hearing the angle and position people take on their region and the wines they want to do. I want to hear their stories, and it makes a beautiful connection. So come to the cellar door. We've got some really cool things there. You'll always get to taste our current releases, but we also, to date, still have in back vintage every wine we've ever made.
Wow.
So you can actually buy wines back to 94 of all the wines. So we have a very, very extensive back vintage program. So, if you want to taste something with age on it, we've actually done the aging for you in fabulous conditions. You can up your game. You can pay a little bit more. We've got a small fee which is refundable on purchase, but you can pay actually for tutor tastings and cedar tastings, where you can actually taste some of the quite expensive wines that we produce, or you can actually have a tasting and tour and come up here and taste from these large barrels, and our staff will talk to you about the different varietals and the actual soils that they come from and how they actually affect the wine. So there's sort of lots of interaction, and if the winemakers are here or it's a Friday, there's a fair chance there'll be a barbecue on, so you can generally sit down with us and have something to eat and see what we're doing. But at the moment in the Barossa, harvest is just starting to get into gear, and lots of activity. So there's never been a better time than to come up, see the ferments, smell the ferments, see the harvesters going, great picking. It's the action time of the year, and it's really exciting and fascinating to watch. And everyone does it a bit different. So come up and enjoy yourself in the region, and winemakers are really passionate people about what they do, and they love to tell you why they're doing it, what they're thinking, and try to, hopefully that then translates into the wines that you can drink later on.
I have a question without notice for both of you, and you mentioned something which really struck a chord with me. You said you pay a small fee and you'll get it back as a refund on your purchase. I mean this in the nicest way to all winemakers who are listening. But every place in cellar door seems to be different, whether it's in the Barossa or McLaren Vale, some of them don't charge for tastings, some of them do charge for tastings and take the money off your purchase, and some of them just charge for tastings. Is that all individual to the cellador and the winemaker in regards to paying staff and actually trying to make a profit for the business? Because I think your model works really well. If I have a really good experience and enjoy the wine, I'm going to buy a bottle of wine because I feel bad. And JR, you go there, you have great food. I feel like you're taking the time to go there, you're going to give back. But if there's, we went somewhere in McLaren Vale and it was just, here's your $10 to tasting, and then that was it. I think we're blessed here in South Australia that maybe I'm being a bit selfish going, no, I think that should be taken off the price. I don't know. What's your take?
Well, we obviously, if you buy a bottle of wine, we'll deduct your tasting fee from that.
Yeah.
So we do that out of good faith that, you've then bought wine. But there's also taxes involved in bottles of wine that you don't sell.
Yep.
So even though we didn't receive any money for it for pouring the wine and giving it to you, we still have to pay a tax on that.
Yeah.
So it's just helping covering some of the operating costs for, and in small producers, if they're opening, 50 cases of wine in a year or something like that, it adds up and every little bit counts.
There's a lot of wine tours as well, aren't there, where you get people that go, hey, let's go to 15 wineries and do a small tasting and just get pissed for free. So there'd be people who take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, so the exuberant enjoyment of wine. We actually don't do bus tours. We're catering for people that are really passionate about wine and want to know about it. If you want to, load up and have a great day and not drive, take the wine train or something. That could be pretty good.
What a good idea, wine train. Why don't we think of that?
What's your take on it? Because you don't charge for tastings.
Yes, we do.
We
don't charge you, Jared.
Oh, shit.
I have to present you with it.
No, but we get that back, don't we, if we buy stuff? Yeah.
So, Ian's 100% right.
Yeah.
It just covers off some of the operational expenses, and it's fully refundable, on purchase. We do a $5 tasting, I think a $15 tasting, and a $25, and you can do a Shiraz Masterclass for $50. Again,
that's in that prison kind of room, isn't it?
In the dungeon there.
Yeah.
And if you do buy a bottle of wine, it's refundable. So it's a very, very small fee, and you're drinking, some great wines.
That makes sense to me. I'd be more than happy to go here. I'll pay that, and I don't know. I just feel like that the experience we had in McLaren Vale was fantastic. We bought wine every place we went because of the experience, the people telling us about wine, educating us. So I was like, hey, we're going to give back to South Australian wine. Some people obviously take advantage of it.
And don't you love it when you're sitting in a great restaurant and you're looking at a wine list and you've been to the places and you know the places and you feel confident, you feel comfortable, you feel like you have a background story you can share with people. I mean, that's what wine's about. And then you taste the wine and you can talk from the hip that you've sat with a winemaker, you've watched grapes go through. It's awesome. It's such a cool thing, and it just to me, wine just amplifies any experience. It just makes it so much more interesting, and there's so much more to engage in when you have that. And great wine just takes it to the next level again.
I agree. You mentioned your staff with authority, and that's what I love about John, and he's hand-picked his staff to trust to explain the journey of the wines. And you also, my wife was talking about this the other day with her family, like the food that you've got at First Drop, like these are your recipes, like this is your thing that you don't have, the way she explained, you don't have chefs here, you've got cooks, right, that you're saying, hey, this is how you should do it. And that for me is everything is an expression of you, which is...
Well, it's an expression of First Drop, and like all great wineries and great brands, they're an honest expression of who they are. They speak of the wines, speak of their place where they're grown, and they represent their regions. And we're lucky enough to have a small kitchen where we marry those wines with some tapas that is all best in breed produce. So that's becoming a bit of a thing with wine tourism. And the Barossa does that beautifully. The McLaren Vale has similar offerings. So it's really important. It's that connection with consumers when they sit in that restaurant, as Ian said, and say, I went to Torbreck and I had I had that laird, I had that run rig, I had that woodcutters, and these are the reasons why they make it, and I think we should order it.
Yeah.
That's a great way of, as they say in the marketing game, following the product home. Making that connection between the producer, the place, and, the restaurant.
This has been great, Ian. Thank you so much for having us in here. I don't want to leave because the smell is just absolutely beautiful. I've loved it.
It's been great. Ian, just early days, what do you reckon, 21?
Look, a quick vintage snapshot. It's been a very cool summer. We had some nice rainfall at all the right times. It wasn't necessarily the wettest winter, but the rain fell when we needed it. We've currently got a week of really mild weather, which is just snapping everything back and standing it up to attention. And by all accounts, I think there'll be some reasonable yields there. So, I'm very, very optimistic of a very strong year. I think we're going to see, quality and, for the grower's point, some quantity. And I'm very excited. So, expectant father mode at the moment, just waiting for things to be just ready. And we're not quite there, but I'm been out in the vineyards all day, and things are looking, in a really good spot.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yep.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.